It's v.h.s.x. What do you mean?
Alright everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. Today I wanted to talk about a video from Mad Moon titled Why Dead by Daylight is on Borrowed Time. Now, it is a bit of a lengthy video, so I even have it on, I think, like 1.5 times speed. Just to kind of make it a little bit quicker and easier for me to get to the points. But there is a part here that I wanted to kind of touch on real quick. And there might be other ones too. And I wanted to kind of give my thoughts on it.
It's the illusion of growth. Like, these people are just coming in for events and license brand recognition around new killers or survivors that make them excited for a game they wouldn't normally play. And as soon as they boot up, they get absolutely fucking devoured by this player base who has a monolith of skills that they are just not equipped to handle. And it's like Saturn eating his son right out of the womb. They just stand no chance, and they realize that this game is fucking awful, and they don't want to play it.
Yeah, I think that is a very, very valid point when it comes to a game like this. Like I've said many times, this is covering how difficult it is for a new player to get into the game. And it's because of just how much depth the game actually has. It has so much information and nuance. And there's so many things that come into play when playing this game that I think it's very hard to try to explain a lot of things to people. And even nowadays, we still get misinformation. We still get people not understanding how the game works. We still have people that don't know how to play the game correctly. We still have people with thousands of hours even who still don't know what they're doing. And that is like the biggest thing with this game is merely that fact. Like, new players are struggling, and there isn't a good enough amount of information to understand how these things work. There's really not a good amount of information for people coming into the game, especially because there's just a lot of things that don't make sense. And there's a lot of things you kind of have to know from playing the game in order to be able to, when faced with that challenge again, to be able to overcome it. And I think that's one of the bigger problems with the game as a whole. And of course, it's because of that, it's not a pick up and play in that sense. A lot of people are going to pick up when they think it might be kind of interesting and then drop it immediately afterwards because it doesn't have that longevity. Now, on the other hand, it also does have a very dedicated fan base, as we've seen, and it definitely has a lot to do with the addictive nature that this game really brings. I think there's a very arcadey sort of feeling when we play this game. And the reason I say that is because this game is random in terms of the maps you're going to get, the sort of tiles you're going to find, and if you're playing as a survivor, you're going to have a random killer pretty much every time, depending on, what's what. Obviously, until like a release comes around, then it's around the same. But, and then if you're playing on killer, of course, you're also going to be seeing a bunch of random selected survivors with randomly selected essentially perks on top of that. And then a lot of the time it could also be varying skill levels. So the highs and the lows are sort of interchangeable in a lot of ways. Like, each match is not like the last one. And even though negativity bias is going to say that it is, right? Like, especially with survivor players that complain about tunneling that only happens once every, let's say, 30 matches or whatever have you, the negativity bias will obviously still bleed through, and that's also what keeps people sort of kind of hating the game, as well as the fact that they're not really remembering the positives, but they'll fully remember the negatives. Even though it only happened one time, even though the situation only occurred once or twice, they'll automatically add that onto their negativity bias when it comes down to it. So I think there's it's a multi-layered, nuanced topic when we talk about something like this.
Player base, as well as just making this game virtually unplayable for newbie players, both survivor and killer, because it is so hostile and unfriendly to them. There's the technical debt of taking quick and easy routes, rather than coding properly with the hard work that would be required to fix real issues within the game. And last but not least, there's the bloat debt.
Okay, so I want to quickly touch on that point as well. obviously, I already spoken about it. The new player experience is too difficult for most. But the other part is the programming issue. Now, the programming issue, we really just don't have enough information about the game itself. We're not developers. We don't work there. We don't know anything about it. But we can understand that either it could be laziness or it could be just like badly coded, but it just happens to just work, and then it's really difficult to try to like make it work, considering how everything is, though, considering the output of content, considering the output of the cosmetics, considering the output of, you know, all sorts of things that are going on in that office. Like, it just seems like it's a lot of stuff that they have to do all at once, and I think that that's just because of what's keeping them afloat in a lot of ways. And I think that it would explain a little bit of as to why we have this kind of game that's like, feels like it's kind of stuck together with duct tape and bubblegum at this point. And I think that understanding that, I think, really offers at least a little bit of insight as to why we're having, like, the game is the way that it is. And I think on top of that, we'll at least get a bit more of an understanding as to why the game is just so difficult to balance. Now, when we're talking about changes coming to the game as well, because I want to touch on that, is the community, which they tried to get feedback from to improve their game, is unreliable because of the inherent biases that we see from, you know, from both ends, right? And unfortunately, whoever can screech the loudest is going to receive the most changes. And unfortunately, the vast majority of casuals that play Survivor are going to be the loudest in Behavior's ears, and of course, it ends up leading to a really mismatched sort of like lack of a power role on the killer end. In other words, just to quickly summarize, it's a lack of power placement going to one end, and all of the rest, you know, sort of gets fed the feast, essentially. And that is like the main problems that I've seen with this game. I don't believe they really had a vision, or even currently have a vision as to what they want to do with the game. I think the game is sort of evolving by itself at this point. Like I've stated many times, I believe that in consideration to how the game, you know, started off to be a sort of a horror game, a horror movie simulator, sort of in a way, on how it's played, and then next thing you know, looping sort of kind of happened from the community, and obviously from that also comes like when certain perks that would be used a certain way according to the intention of the developers, the players will then use it in a different way that will cause the game to break in some way, shape, or form, and then they had to fix that as well. The players also add on to what makes the game so difficult to balance and what makes the game so difficult to fix, because of the fact that, you know, it's going to be a lot of players that are going to find something wrong with it, and then it ends up leading to exploits. And obviously, in combination with the fact that the community is usually disingenuous in a lot of ways when it comes down to what things, you know, that are actually needing to be fixed and what things that are actually needing to be improved upon. And unfortunately, like I've stated, it, you know, whoever has the most amount of voices and is going to complain the loudest is going to be heard, unfortunately. So the game heads in a very bad direction in that, because of that, and it ends up just negatively affecting most sides. Like, both sides end up just getting hit, you know, as a result of it. So, and I've already spoken about it, you know, numerous times, talking essentially about what that entails and how we got there, really. And it's a lot to do with the entitlement. It has a lot to do with just how just toxic the community can be. And yeah, I mean, like, the toxicity of the community is a whole nother discussion.
Survivor, each would have their own perks, and typically, but not always, there would be a new map in the mix, and that means that every 3 months there were 6 new perks, 1 entirely new power, and maybe even a new map on the field. Now, that additional map must now work with every killer made before it, and every killer made after it. Now let's just focus in for a minute, just on the killer role for a second. Now, on the surface, this isn't so bad in the beginning, when you have kind of a lower roster of killers. Making sure only 10 or maybe even 13 killers are able to work on these new maps isn't so hard to keep track of, nor is their powers. But with each new addition and each new map and each game-breaking bug that enters the game with the technical debt, and the harder and harder it is to keep up with fixing the problems that affect old killers. How long did it take Michael Myers to get attention and a rework? What about Clown? What about Ghostface? Pig? Have you ever just thought about how little behavior really cares about the old killers in general? For myself, my own killer is constantly affected by these elements, as Deathslinger gets hits with game-breaking bugs like the spear shot bouncing on survivors, to the maps themselves no longer working for shots, as invisible walls that were never there now exist for some reason, or areas you should be able to shoot through have just never been patched to allow me to, despite visually the fact that, by all accounts, I should be able to shoot through them. What about Pyramid Head on his treatment center, where his shots just will not pass through the windows because they're all at a different, level, I guess? What about Night in the ethereal plane being passed?
I will say that I have touched on this topic in a previous video. And yeah, I've definitely made that same sort of assessment where I think that that behavior doesn't really care for the vast majority of the killer players. I mean, killer choices, I should say, and possibly killer players. And as I've said, that literally ties a lot more into just the community as a whole. I've talked about how that really ties into just their favor for survivor side mainly. And this is purely just going off of patch notes, just purely going off of changes that go through. It really definitely seems that the proof is sort of in the pudding when we look at those things. And the recent PTB was a good example of that. And we've also even seen that Behavior themselves claim that every killer is going to get their time, but there's killers that haven't been touched for years. There's other killers that have barely been updated. And those updates really did not affix their core issues. And then there's also the killers that are constantly getting patched, which is odd because of the fact that there's still those two other categories of killer choices that just are not really being adjusted. And I've also always made the assessment that if we just were to move up the lower tiers to sort of create a variety, there would be less complaints across the board from either side, because then maybe there'll be more variety, and maybe the complaining about going against the same three killers every game would probably be reduced, because they would be less incentivized to play the strongest, because they feel that they can actually have a fighting chance with other characters in the game in order to try to solve that problem. Because I think that's why they continue to patch the same few, because of the fact that they get complained about the most. So I figure, why not add a little variety, and it might level it out, possibly. I'm not sure. We have no way to prove that to be true or not. But it is a theory, and that I'm not too sure, right? I'm not too sure. But I figured that if we kind of level it out in that sense, there would be a little bit more variety across the board. But obviously something like that would mean that behavior needs to actually put the time in to update characters, any of those updates. And it's really a question is sort of when, I guess. And sometimes even if, because as we've seen from a video from Pixel Bush, it doesn't really seem like they really even remember some of these characters even exist sometimes, because they just don't get touched for years. They don't get any updates at all for multiple years. They don't ever get anything changed. And like I've stated before, I think it's possibly just because they have bigger fish to fry in a sense. It seems like they're constantly having to develop something new pretty much all the time, because there's always a brand new update every couple of months, dropping brand new content. And I think that's why they even slowed down with some of the maps that they're making, and and even being touched on in this video, not you have to make maps that work for all the killers. And yeah, I mean, I don't even think that they really do that either. To be fair, I don't even think that behavior actually does do that, because of the mere fact that either A, most likely most people aren't playing M1 killers. I would say the vast majority are on the M2s and most likely playing B tier and up, because keep in mind, like, there is a lack of variety, like I've mentioned, because there really is not you're really just not incentivized as a casual player to want to play as something weak and then also just get affected by MMR level, get affected by the weaknesses of those characters, when you can play somebody more enjoyable and more fun, because you know that they're not going to be completely useless when trying to deal with the usual sort of gameplay loop. So that's really where I'm coming from with that. I'm probably all over the place, but that's where we're at. Well, that's going to be my thoughts on the video. If you want to watch the original video, it'll be linked in the description. But I only touched on, I think, about 2 points, or at least 2 sections in the video. It is quite a long video, so hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. Check out the original, of course. Consider supporting or joining the Patreon or becoming a member for perks and stuff like that, and to get your names read off at the end of every video, of course. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching and for supporting, and consider joining the Discord so you can join the community, and and to come together with like-minded people to yap about a video game and other fun topics. I'll see you guys in the next one. Make sure, if you do join the Discord, make sure you accept the rules. I'll see you guys next time.